I had a remark about PMs contributing and involving themselves with the team to determine the definition of done. Ooh, definition of done. Because from a technical background, I don't want to say strong feelings, because I don't really have strong feelings. For teams who don't have a definition of done, and they get together and they form an initial definition of done that's shared between teams, I have things that I think should be in that definition of done.
Mm-hmm. But you should be part of that discussion.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm bringing that from all my experiences, technical, non-technical, team member, Scrum Master, product owner. I'm bringing my contribution to the definition of done. Like, the definition of done, I shouldn't have to write in each story, go to test, go to prod, have the unit tests in each one. Like, all that stuff should be a given. I'm not writing any of that in acceptance criteria.
Sure.
So when we have a discussion about definition of done, I'm bringing all that stuff. I mean, since we like to argue about definition of done on the internet.
We don't. Yes.
There's a real, that's another huge, there's a whole podcast that could and probably should be done on definition of done, because that's another thing there's so much confusion surrounding that. And I don't necessarily, there isn't any one right answer. So there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of variables and a lot of,
right answer?
there's a Scrum answer. Okay.
I think the box of the definition of done is fairly straightforward. But what you put in that box, we can negotiate. This is where I was going, but again, I didn't know how deep I wanted to get into this discussion. The definition of done is a box of what we all agree across all the teams. What we all agree is done. But I could easily see in programs I've been with previously, the argument that I've observed / been in on this topic is, you can't add so much stuff to this, so much overhead, that it significantly slows down the ability to quickly produce work items.
Yeah, it's a trade-off, right? So you don't want to impede flow by putting in vertically all these things. But the teams can figure that out. And the product side of the house is part of the team in this case. You have to figure out what definition of done really means. Are you done when at the end of the sprint something is shippable? Or is it releasable, right? There's a distinction there. So I always coach my teams to develop on a cadence and release on demand. The release part is outside of their control as such. The business can say, we wanted to release here. And they should be able to just do it without going back to the dev teams.
Now we're getting into stuff that's not in the Scrum Guide, and that I welcome angry tweets on the internet about. Like, who is accountable to the definition of done? Is it the whole team? And I ask that because I have been in the product position to have to defend the definition of done to the CEO when he says, how are you calling this done when it's not in production and usable by customers?
Well, I'll repeat this like I said, I can't repeat it exactly verbatim, but it's pretty close. And that is, if there is a definition of done that has been established by the organization, that must be followed minimally by the Scrum team. Okay, minimally. Now that's the operative word here. That doesn't mean that you, as an individual Scrum team, couldn't even add some additional things that were pertinent just to you. But minimally, you are. If there is no organizational definition of done defined, then it is up to the Scrum team. It also does mention that there should be alignment of definition of done among multiple teams. Right. But from a Scrum perspective, that's the definition of done. Right. Is there one already developed by the organization? If so, are we following that minimally? Okay. If not, we create one as a Scrum team, and it must be shared across minimally across our Scrum teams. As a product owner, someone who doesn't have technical experience, definition of done, the first thing that comes to mind is that definition of done may have some kind of essential, feedback loop requirement, or something that I have been able to make sure to collect, put in front of a customer, and get approval. And so I'm not sure if that's part of the definition of done, or if that's just part of my job, or if that needs to be called out in the definition of done. But as you said, if it's not kind of written down, then so the whole point from my perspective of the definition of done is to very clearly set the expectations across the board of the minimal that we need to complete to say that we have an increment completed.
I think you just nailed it. These are the expectations. Like if we have a welding business, I got to wear my dark goggles, I got to wear my ear protection, I got to wear my gloves while I'm welding. Like, I don't need you to write all that in a story. I know I need to do all that. Yep. That's a given for every welding project that I start. I'm going to do all that.
There's probably maintenance on the welding machine.
That's not even, but that's just not even negotiable.
Right.
On like, well, for this project, I don't need you to put on your safety gear and all that kind of stuff. Again, like back in the day, I used to work with heavy equipment when I was in the Air Force. And you had to wear gloves, you had to wear steel-toed boots, you had to wear ear protection, double ear protection actually. You had to wear double ear protection. You can never pull up to an aircraft without a minimum of a 2-man crew. Like these are definition of done requirements. And I should point out, you could break those requirements. You could choose to like, I don't need ear protection. The plane's off. The aircraft's off. It's off on the ramp, and the engines are not running. I don't need ear protection. You could do that, certainly, but you are breaking the definition of done on that project.
Right.
You know that you're breaking the definition of done for whatever reason. Maybe you didn't want to. Maybe you were already from one plane to another in transit. You didn't want to go back to the office to get earplugs or whatever. Okay, cool. You're making the, but you know that you're breaking the agreed on definition of done.
Yeah, there's no ambiguity there.
There's no ambiguity. You're breaking.
You know you're doing it when you do it.
So my question here is: are you doing that because you feel pressure in the organization to compete, produce,
meet deadlines?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Are you doing that because of pressures, or are you doing that for some like why? Why are you breaking? So and because I've been in organizations where the definition of done. I've been in an organization where they write stories for like deploy it to test, deploy it to production, and those are stories.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a story. I as a product owner would come in. I've been in the position. I come into the organization and I'm like, deploy to test is not like, that's not a story. Now, if you're going to talk about a story with subtasks, do the change, test the change, deploy it to test, deploy it to prod. I can get down with those subtasks. But the business value encompasses all of that. And until it's in production, you as a team cannot claim the value, the business value, until you're done with all these activities. And I may not specify every single one of those activities as acceptance criteria, because I think of acceptance criteria, this goes back to our acceptance criteria episode, I think of acceptance criteria as a checklist for me, the user of the software. I was going to say customer, stakeholder. I could use a lot of terms. Me, the user of the software, to just check off each one as I go down the user story in a demo to say, number A or number B, number A, item A, item B, item C. I agree, it's done.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, that's one of the formats of the acceptance criteria. Right? Verify that, and then A, B, C, D, E, right? Sure. So you could just check those off. I agree, absolutely.
But again, the point of this topic, and the reason I bring this up and segue us into this whole other podcast, is the establishment of your definition of done. For me, it's a much deeper conversation as a PM with a technical background than it might be for a PM with a non-technical background. I realize the arguing point against that immediately is like, yeah, it is, unless your team is all supporting. If your team is supporting all the different things, then maybe that's not true.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. You've summarized it right there.
But, again, assuming your team is not staffed completely by junior developers or offshore developers who just don't want to they don't want to add more work, so they're not going to contribute.
Just doing what's prescribed. So if your model is one of a prescription model, you won't get that, right? They're just going to say, this is what you tell me to do this, I'll do that, and that's it. Right. Do the bare minimum.
Right. But there are people out there with that.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you said something about incentives. So why would somebody do that? I think the military example you gave was a good one, because it aligns with our teams. And our teams are inclusive of, if we're using Scrum, of our Scrum teams. And as a team, we succeed together and we fail together. So if we have defined our expectations and the definition of done to include these things, and we have someone who's decided not to wear their earplugs, their failure becomes not an individual failure, but a team failure. So then now, okay, dig into that rationale. We just have somebody who's like, screw it, or do we have a shortage in supplies? Do we have a Scrum Master that needs to kind of alleviate that impediment and make sure that we have the tools and the supplies and that we need? I
can give you more examples too. I can give you more, another example. I remember before I left a base one time, on one of my last nights on the flight line, as the senior person, I didn't really need junior people to work with because I basically could do everything by myself.
Oh yeah, and 20-something? You knew it all, dude.
I knew how to do everything.
Yeah, of course. Gotcha.
I would never have an accident. It's invincible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the minimum you need to service an aircraft is a 2-man crew, because you always need a spotter. You need someone to put a chalk under the vehicle's tire to make sure you don't have a collision with the aircraft and stuff like that. A 2-man crew is an absolute, and when I mean absolute minimum, that is the absolute minimum. And you could service an aircraft by yourself. However, if you had an accident and you were by yourself, everyone would immediately, there would be no escaping that you were breaking the definition of done, basically. And you, being a senior person, you should know better. So there is no getting out of that discussion of, hey, I took a shortcut. There's no other excuse you could apply in that situation other than I took a shortcut and made a mistake.
Yeah.
There's no way to get out of it. Even with 2 people, you can make a mistake, and then you'll have a discussion of what happened? Why did this mistake happen? Oh, there was not communication between the 2 people, whatever, misread hand signs, whatever. There's some wiggle room in that, because you're not breaking the definition of done.
Yeah.
There's an agreement, and you are following the agreement, versus there's an agreement and you're going against the agreement.
And another point, you are a part of inputting and putting your input to and agreeing to that agreement. Even an established organization definition of done, again, that's minimal. That's the minimal. So if you have additional information, or if you have additional, so you're going through retrospective and you're going what? Why are we writing this in every story? Why isn't this as part of our definition of done? So we should be revisiting this fairly frequently, and our team should be made a part of this. That makes them accountable. It makes them have ownership over it. So I would say that might be a little bit different than the military, in the sense that you're probably not so much a part of that creating that definition of done. They have ownership. They can. So what doesn't work, they have the opportunity to speak up and change.
That gets harder in some hierarchical institutions. I mean, maybe even the military. I don't know how much influence you would have trying to change the procedures and the processes that are there.
Well, here's the thing about definition. Well, this is a great example. It's a bad example because it's not software development, but I also think there's an advantage because it's not software development. The development team could be applied to anything. I guess that's the other thing that you're kind of leaving out. It's like development team.
Yeah.
You're servicing an aircraft. You're a development team. You're not writing software, but you're contributing to a goal. The definition of done in that example is the bare minimum of prerequisites for you to call the job done. Your team could decide to add more to that, and it could stay inside of your team, because the other teams might not adopt the best practices of your team. Sure. But eventually, over time, this certainly happened. Eventually, over time, as the teams that service aircrafts, they come in and you find out, well, when we have these 3 people together as a crew for the night, they get their aircraft done in 75% of the time of any other team. What are they doing right?
Are they taking shortcuts, or are they just more efficient?
Exactly. Yeah. And as a supervisor, you should be asking that. You should say, are they taking shortcuts?
Yeah.
And that question, are they taking shortcuts, you should be able to look at their safety record right? And like in the Air Force, we didn't really have like a net promoter score, but like in software development, you hopefully with your stakeholders and your stakeholder teams, or if you service internal teams, you'll have a net promoter score with the people that you work with to say, hey, like this specific development team, their velocity is super high, their contributions to the program are really, everything we ask them to do, they get done, but are people satisfied with their solutions? You should have some kind of spec for that. The equivalent, the aircraft loading, unloading example equivalent of that is, let me look at their safety record, let me look at their on-time departures, because in this example of what I'm talking about, the goal is to departing aircraft and arriving aircraft are handled differently. Arriving aircraft, the air crew is at the end of their air day, end of their hours, or whatever. They're kind of like truckers. They have certain hours that they're allowed to be on the plane. And when they arrive on station, they're just looking to get off the aircraft. They're just whiny and they've been flying, so like you can't say that they're just whiny about it. They're just what was it? Snivelly? Is that
snivelly?
Yeah, they're being a little snivelly about it. But I mean, you have to have some empathy for your users. Like they've been in the aircraft potentially up to 12 hours flying. Maybe if they flew from Atlanta or whatever to Japan, they've been flying 12, 13, 14 hours. Have some empathy for them. So you look at the safety record of the ground crew. How many accidents did they have? Right? How many
incident reports?
Incidents, right? Injuries, accidents, collisions, that kind of stuff. But also you're looking at how many times did they delay? Were they blamed for the delay of the aircraft, or did the crew complain that the crew was taking too long or whatever? If it was an arrival, because arrivals and departures are handled differently. But you kind of look at all those together, and again, if you have good stats, if you've instrumented well, right? The product people deal with that all the time. Software is not instrumented. But if you've instrumented well, and or you're doing good surveys with thumbs up, thumbs down, net promoter score, very basic stuff, you can start taking in that data of which teams are servicing the business the best. I don't know a better way.
No, it's the grade of service we're trying to get to, right? So which team has what level or grade of service? Right? That's the term they use in the military. Yeah.
This Scrum guide is super light on how the definition of done is crafted, because I could easily see like what we're talking about now of like, let me go to the best teams. So let's pivot back hardcore to software development. Let me pull the best teams. The people that hit their velocity, have a high net promoter score, their backlogs are in order, all the things that we would talk about, just like real black and white type of stuff. You could argue team to team, right? But we're not going to do that for a second. Who would be the person to say, well, these are the top tier teams in the organization? So what are they doing in their definition? Do they have a more expansive definition of done? Maybe they're doing the minimum definition done that we've set across all the teams in the program, but they were also doing all these other things. Their definition of done includes good unit tests and automation and monitoring and alerting and production for the things that they push out. And the other teams aren't doing that.
Right.
The other teams are doing manual testing. The other teams are pushing to this environment, or their WIP is more items, or their
code coverage is less.
Their code coverage is less, or their cycle time and their lead time is longer for the other teams as opposed to these. Like, what are these teams doing, and why are they so far ahead of the other? If your definition of done is across several teams, who is the person that prompts them to append or update their definition of done? Is it just one person on one team, and then they kind of try to get the community going? Because that seems like an uphill battle.
It is an uphill battle. It should be somewhere higher than that.
I mean, as a PO,
I disagree. Really? So unless you have an organizational definition of done established, this is my opinion. Okay, I believe that the Scrum team should work together to define their definition of done. That should include the Scrum Master certainly facilitating and understanding what that definition of done is, the product owner putting in and injecting that empathy, and the organizational, marketing, sales, those type of things, but certainly centering around the user experience, along with the development understanding of their very individualized process. So for instance, in the manner in which they push software into production. So those are all going to be different. So each definition of done is very unique. Yeah. I think that establishing a minimum definition of done should be done by the Scrum team if there isn't one organizationally. Additionally, if there are multiple Scrum teams, I believe that those Scrum teams we generally don't have Scrum teams that are boilerplate of one another. Each of them are doing different things for different reasons, with different goals and different metrics, which means it makes sense for them as a team to potentially augment the minimum definition of done that has been established for the Scrum team. So that's my opinion on that one. The other thing I just wanted to mention is there's so many freaking variables, right? So when you were talking about your example with the military and the planes and, saying, well, we have this really high performing team that, all right, we're getting great metrics out of across the board. But that immediately made me go back to think about context, the Hawthorne Effect. Are you familiar with that one? I don't know for our readers. So the Hawthorne Effect was a study that they did, and they basically said, hey, what could we do? And I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember exactly, but it was done, I don't know, like the 1920s.
It was a long time ago.
It's like the 1920s. Yeah. So they did an experiment, and they're trying to get manufacturing of, I don't even remember what it was, up. So they hypothesized that maybe lighting may have caused an improvement in improving the manufacturing process and their throughput, essentially. And what they found was, so they did an experiment. And so they did lighting changes. And so they increased the light, right? And when they increased the light, production went up. Okay, cool. Right. So then they were like, all right, well, let's do a little more experimentation. And so they decreased the light. And so what happened? The production went up. And so they actually there's a picture I saw of actually these workers that are standing in long lines. Some of them had like buckets over their heads so that they could actually have, some of them had light and some of them didn't. And you know what happened? Production went up. And what they realized was the Hawthorne Effect was an increase in production because they knew they were being observed.
Oh, no.
So yes, as long as they knew they were being observed, their production was going up. So my point is that sometimes it's not just so easily understood. There's a lot of variables, a lot of players, a lot of metrics, and it takes a lot of, so anyway.
Watch them every step of the way.
That's a very passive aggressive way of making productivity go up.
Right?
Just pointing that out.
So when you're being measured on basically the widgets that you put through, as long as you're being watched and measured, actively being watched, you're going to do better and better and better. Yeah. So my point is, hey, I don't know from that team's perspective. I think I would love to have been on that aircraft carrier to be like, what's causing that? And it would be, so, and I would be delving potentially into some more, what else is what's different about this team?
I'm just wondering, because again, there's not a lot of again, the Scrum guy is just do a definition of done if there is one, just do one and follow it minimally
follow it. Yeah,
the bare minimum effort. But the point of me bringing this up is if there is a definition of done, and there are teams that are kind of playing with it and figuring out if we do some other adjustments, we get better quality or better results or whatever. What is your, assuming you have more than one team, right? Because that's, if it's just one team, there's no reason to talk about it. It's super easy. Again, assuming you have more than one team or more than one product owner who has their own team, each product owner has 2 teams or whatever, and you have a whole program of you have 8 teams or whatever. Your definition of done is shared between all the teams. How do you amend that later to say, hey, when we run our tests through some kind of front-end integration automation that this other team has done with 10% of what they own, they have much higher customer satisfaction or whatever. We should do that for all the teams and append it to our definition of done rather than having all 4 product managers or product owners in the program, write it into their stories or whatever. Like, we just want to do it program wide. Is it a development leadership decision? Is it a product leadership decision? Is it all the teams just kind of talking to each other and deciding?
It can be as simple as that, right? But that doesn't happen that often. So it's usually, we're talking about multiple teams.
Yes.
And typically, although not always, right, there's some sort of scaling involved. So depending on the scaling framework of choice in this scenario, it would be the person who is at that level. For example, in SAFE, it might be an RTA. In Scrum at Scale, it might be the chief product owner looking at this. And then I feel like the two circles of the Venn diagram are actually closer together in real life than depicted on that diagram. So it could be a chief product owner in conjunction with their equivalent on the process side to talk about this and say, how do we align the teams? Get them together for a bit and talk about commonalities and differences and come up with one version that can be perhaps ratified across the two teams.
Let me ask the same question in a different way.
Hoping to get a different answer.
And hopefully I get the same answer in a different way. I don't even know what I'm asking anymore. Hopefully I get the same passive-aggressive answer. Man, what if you're the first product owner / manager at an organization and you have, let's say you have 2 development teams and your company's grown to a point where they bring in a product manager for the first time and a scrum master for the first time. So now you have like the full-blown, all the prescribed positions, right? The whole prescription. Who introduces, we need to have a definition done for the first time, and then how do you do that with your teams?
I think largely it falls on the process side. I mean, typically it would be the Scrum Master or somebody like that to say, hey guys, how do we know we're done?
Yeah.
Right? And it starts there. But you said 2 teams. So if you have 2 teams and you have 2 different Scrum Masters, then they have to collaborate to make sure that they have a common definition of done that goes across those 2 teams, and you scale up from there. It is not an easy thing to do because often the teams would say, well, this doesn't apply to us, right? Because that team has specific nuanced things they do. Yeah. So those things don't apply to us and vice versa. Sure. So you kind of have to go across the board and say, let's just raise it up a bit.
Yeah, if you're doing mobile apps and
one web app and mobile app.
One team's mobile developers, one team's web, one team goes to the app stores for approval and the other team doesn't. You're like, well, I don't need that in my definition.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, maybe you don't need it in your definition done, but I kind of think if you have 2 teams, each team has a Scrum Master, I kind of think if you're going to charge the Scrum Masters with being the process owners, here we go, back to a theme on the podcast, they should see the need to be like, hey, our definition of done is out of date. Our definition of done doesn't include these things that people have been asking about. They should see the things going on and know they've got to facilitate a collaborative session between the 2 teams to amend the definition of done, or create the definition of done, whatever, delete things, whatever they need to do.
But if they don't see that themselves, there's nothing wrong with somebody, product, anybody.
Oh, I was gonna say if they
prompting them.
I was gonna say if they don't have, like, if the organization doesn't have Scrum, like if
there's that
someone's
too.
just playing the role.
Wear a hat. Wear a hat.
So I have a couple of thoughts here. So, number one, you mentioned something about, hey, what happens when you have multiple teams? And so aligning across on a definition of done, and then who makes that decision? Is it leadership? Whatever. It sounded to me that almost at that point, it could be pivoted to a definition of done that's minimally defined by the organization, potentially. At that point now, you need to follow that. So there's that. That could actually be adopted, right? So there's that. My next thought was...
We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about, like, again, the program where I was with a CEO who was like, if it's not in production and users can't use it, you can't call it done. So it dictates. Or I've been in programs with a development lead who's like, if you can't deploy it to the environments, if it's not checked in where you can deploy it to whatever environment with a click. The definition done for one program was it needs to be releasable with... That program was very advanced. It needs to be releasable behind feature flags, and it doesn't matter which environments it's released to. So stage, test, production, that doesn't matter. That's not in the definition done. But in that environment, they were super advanced where they had all their releases behind feature flags, and they handed off each stage of the release to whoever owned the environment is being released to. So the production users would choose to take the thing into their environment, but the development team would call it done. Because as far as they're concerned, it's done, and all of their automated tests have succeeded. Their reports came back with 0 problems or no problems with the release. So the release and all the items that were in it are done. But it wasn't in production yet. Because they handed off that responsibility to somebody else to choose when to take it into their environment. So basically, you could stack up multiple releases at that company. You could stack up 2-3 releases to be like, you have 3 different releases. Each one has different features that stack on each other. Well, I'm going to reject the first 2 releases, take the 3rd release, which includes everything from the previous 2, and not the big UAT test.
Sure.
And only do 1 big test. Like so their definition of done was different than other places that I've been at. Again, a director of development had influence into that when I was talking about there. And another was the CEO directly had influence into, like, unless it's in production and people can use it, don't call it done. So I've been in a bunch of different environments with different stakeholders who made the call to affect the definition of done. That's why I'm kind of hammering on, like, well, who's involved and how do we know it's time to change, and this, like, because people that listen to this that listen for more than 12 minutes, like, eventually they'll realize, like, they will have different experiences. That's right, I'm never letting it go.
Well, just to kind of just try to wrap this up from my perspective, I just want to say, so I think I gave you my thoughts in regards to being able to take a definition of done that's been created by your teams and potentially actually creating that as an organizational standard, minimally, right? That's an option. The other thought I had was to create, if you have multiple teams, that definition of done. But, and I was trying to express this before, but I don't know if I got it across. I don't believe that, that they do need to follow that minimally. But to your example given earlier, where you have a mobile app that doesn't apply to someone else, that their definition of done can be different, can include additional items or things in addition to the things that are minimal. So in my mind, you would collaborate across your teams, find the cross section of things that apply to all, and then in regards to changing, updating, and iterating on definition of done, I do believe that the Scrum Master has a role in that. I believe that the entire Scrum team has a role in that. Sure. But I also believe that this, perhaps there needs to be some regular revisit. There really should be some regular revisiting of the definition of ready and definition of done in my personal opinion, number 1. But number 2, I kind of think this could be self-limiting, to use a term used earlier, in our retrospectives. Yeah. So to be deliberate about our definition of done. Are we meeting the definition of done? Which items aren't we meeting? Are there things tasks that we are repetitively putting in that we could actually include in the definition of done? So I think that might be something as a Scrum Master that we could be more deliberate about, and certainly create a bit of a cadence just to make sure that it's something that we're thinking about fairly regularly.
I agree with that. And I also think another way to kind of get input into that DoD is, what feedback are you getting at your sprint reviews? Are they feeding back to you that something's not quite right? Maybe it didn't meet your definition of done. And the individual teams in that example Brian had, mobile app, web app, whatever, right? Those individual teams can have definition of done for their own output, right? That's fine. But collectively, as a program, a group of teams, there needs to be a distinction between what is releasable versus what is shippable, right? And based on that, they can say, we're done, but we're not done as a group, not as a team.
So I think that's true. And I think too, I've been in situations where dependent on the team, that the process actually for deployment differs between teams, which means that innately that definition of done would actually, so the pipeline, so not common, but I have seen that happen, and it was for some valid reasons, and they were going through definitely some learning curve. But in that case, there wouldn't be 100% definition of done that would have met that criteria across the board. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I mean, just in regards to figuring out collectively a definition of done with your teams, potentially adopting that organizationally, continuously inspecting and adapting, and doing that on a regular basis. Pay attention to our feedback loop.
Yep.
Paying attention to, in our retros, hey, are we meeting our definition of done? Where, if we aren't, where? Why? Are there other things that are in our tasks that we could be including in the definition of done so that we don't have to repeat them in the task over and over again? So those are some of the questions I might ask.
Is there an opening for a business risk? And like think about like ear protection or always having a 2-man crew or whatever in my examples before. Like, can the product inject to be like, hey, we're willing to accept risk, to say like all your teams have to have automated tests for all the software except this one team who's kind of out there? Like, is that even negotiable? Like,
not like that.
At that point, you're not doing definition of done. Like, how can you have a team that doesn't comply to the definition of done?
Yeah.
You know?
Unless
I think everybody Yeah, so everybody complies to the minimal definition of done.
Right,
what I'm saying is there might be additions to the definition of done, which would apply to specific teams.
So, like the mobile example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then one more thing that I just wanted to mention, last one, swear. This is the reason I believe that it hasn't been further defined or explicitly defined in the Scrum Guide, because it's complicated and there isn't a silver bullet, there isn't a checkbox, a checklist, and there isn't a simple solution to this. Period. This is something that needs to be explored and inspected and tested, just experimented, adapted.
I think a lot of it is contextual as well, because to have this idea that there is a singular definition of done that we can aspire to, I think that's a fallacy. It is based on context, you know.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like, based on context.
Absolutely.
Are you sure? Like, can I not just like, could I just rattle off a boilerplate definition of done and everyone kind of be like, oh yeah, we kind of should be doing that?
You
at one company, maybe.
But, you know,
but like at one company. But if one company's definition of done encompasses unit testing, I mean, unit testing is pretty basic to me. If you're not unit testing, we might not even be going full TDD, you know, in the code type of stuff. Like, because we know the company's not there yet. But if you were to start a company from scratch and say, like, I would just want to make sure that whenever we code something, it doesn't break.
Write the test first.
Like, you should be writing your code in a way where it's a test first culture. If that is not implemented in your definition of done from day one, you're going to have quality problems. Is there not a boilerplate we can deploy on day one?
But I think you just answered your own question. So yes, you can definitely do that in that case. That's what I'm saying. That's why there's not a universal one. If you're not doing TDD, then you don't have this idea of we should have all the tests written first. They should all pass. Because then they'll go, we're not doing that. Yes. Right? Ideally, yeah. I would love for that culture to be more prevalent, but it's not there.
I have one final thought. So from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding was the rationale for simplifying and changing some of the terminology in the 2020 Scrum Guide was to open it up to a lot more industries than just software development.
I get that.
And what that means now is definition of done really does mean really different things to just software development.
That's where I was kind of going when I said it's contextual. It
Yeah.
depends on the product you're building, right?
Yeah. And that's why it can't be defined in the Scrum Guide.
It's ephemeral.
What's your definition of done for this podcast, Brian?
It's that we are done.